First off, just wanted to thank everybody for showing up. This is going to be presented by, of course, Skylar Hamilton, and this is going to be on hot summer fishing tips. I'm going to be a co-host for this deal. My name's Miles Berghoff, aka Sonar. I host a show called Sweetwater, and also I'm a tournament angler, not an Elite Series guy, but we've got the professional angler right here, Skylar Hamilton. So he's going to kind of take it away. If you guys have any questions at all, I'm going to kind of be monitoring all these questions that you send in. So use the question section on your toolbar, and we'll get back to it as soon as appropriate. So Skylar, take it away.
Yeah, do we have like all the stuff that I'm seeing, or is it just my PowerPoint right now?
Yeah, I can see you perfectly. I can see the hot summer fishing tips right now. I don't see anything else personally.
Okay, perfect, because there's all kinds of stuff on my screen, which doesn't really matter, but I don't want everybody to see it. So yeah, summertime fishing. Like he said, my name's Skylar Hamilton. I live in Dandridge, Tennessee. I fished the Elite Series for 2 years now, and fished some of the open stuff before. At a young age. I'm here in Arkansas right now at my friend Forrest Powell's house and doing some stuff with them, doing some things with express boats this week for the Forest Wood Cup. And I just wanted to share with you a few summertime tips. You know, this is a hard time of year to fish, and especially for me, I've struggled this time of year. It's taken me a long time to figure out how to get bites. It just seems like deep fish are hard to catch because of the pressure by now, depending on where you live, and the water temperature is the hottest it's going to be. And just, you know, struggle with getting bites. The past few Elite tournaments we've had this time of year, Chesapeake Bay, which got canceled, it was extremely tough. The Red River tournament, even though it was earlier in the year, it was extremely tough. And it's just this time of year, it's hard to get bites. So we're going to go through a few things here. Maybe it'll help you catch some more fish. So a few topics that we're going to go over. One of the main questions that I get asked, whether to fish deep or shallow, and that, you know, like Kentucky Lake or somewhere like that has ledges or has shallow fish too. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but deep or shallow, it's always a big question. Summertime baits, things that I always throw that get bites. Phases of summertime fishing, you would be surprised. It's actually sort of like the spawn. You have early summer, you know, midsummer and late summer, and actually the fall transition. So all four of those have different things that you need to do, and it's just it gets to where early summer is pretty easy, and then, you know, midsummer it starts getting tougher, and late summer is really tough, and then the transition can be good and it could be bad. But we'll go through that too. And using your electronics, it's really important these days. I use them a lot more than I used to, and to compete on the Elite Series, you have to know how to use them. Those guys are just incredible with their electronics. They can pick out, you know, what kind of fish is what and certain types of bait fish, and you have to get really good with those. So we're going to go in with that a little bit more. Feeding times during the summer. You know, similarities between summer and wintertime. You'd be surprised at how many similarities there are in wintertime fishing and summertime fishing. Baits and where the fish are positioned, and there'll be some people disagree with that, but I fish very similar in the winter times I do in the summertime just to get bites. In northern summers versus southern summers, you can, if you live up north, if you're watching, we're going to go into how those are a little bit different compared to our summers in the south. Fishing at night, something I used to do quite a bit. I don't do it as much anymore. I don't have as much time, but used to fish quite a bit at nighttime. And tips for beating the heat. So just, you know, trying to stay cool, and certain things you need to wear, and just a few tips like that. But we're gonna go to the first slide here. So deep versus shallow. The one thing you want to look at, of course, is water temperature. You can have, you know, so it could be summertime and your water could still be pretty cold, or it could be really warm. And that's really what determines summertime fishing for me. Is not the time of year by the calendar, is more the water temperature. And, you know, once it starts getting above 75 degrees, up close to 80, most of your fish have already spawned. And unless you have a dramatic warm front or something come through and just all of a sudden spike. But that's what you want to look for. And when you're determining whether to fish deep or shallow, the lower the water temperature, seems like the more fish are going to be shallow. They don't just automatically all go offshore. Some places they'll go out pretty quick, but right after the spawn, they kind of work their way gradually back out. And I have a few examples. Like Kentucky Lake, the Elite Series event we had there. If you're not familiar with that, we had a post spawn. You know, there were still a few fish spawning. Waters were in the mid to upper 70s, and a lot of the guys that caught them, I caught mine actually spawning, but the guys that finished in the top 12 are all fishing those channels, the creek channels that ran from those spawning pockets out to the ledges that they sit up on in the summertime. And when Wesley Strader caught his in the back of a creek, but they don't just all go out there at once. So that really determines whether I'm going to fish deep or shallow is the water temperature. And there's always fish shallow. There's always fish that, you know, that live up shallow. And it's just whether I have to, when I go fish a lake that I haven't been to before, I have to determine where the majority of the population of fish are at to succeed, to you know, to go catch big fish. And if there's a 20% population of fish up shallow versus the 80% out deep, and I'm going to go fish shallow, of course. But another thing you're going to look at is the thermocline, which is just a layer of oxygen in the water. It's easy to find with your depth finder, and it'll look like it'll just be a streak. You'll see all the activity in a certain area, and most of your fish are going to be above that thermocline. So if some lakes don't have a thermocline, places that have current, if you have an extremely hot water temperature, that'll push fish shallow as well. And it seems like later in the year, I live on Douglas Lake in Tennessee, and later in the year, those fish start going from 35 foot and they start creeping their way up. You know, the water's going down too, of course, but you start catching them at 18 and 15 foot. And I think a lot of that has to do with thermocline too, and a lot of it's got to do with bait, and that's the next thing we're going to talk about. But just, you know, one thing to look at when you're out there, if you can't find a depth where most of your activity's at, and you can go, one thing I'll do is if I'm going to a lake I haven't been to in a while, I'll drive under a bridge, and usually that's a very deep spot in the lake, and I'll look at my graph and I'll see that thermocline, because most of your activity in that under that bridge will be in that certain depth range. So you'll want to look at that depth range, and then you can go find humps and points and you know, brush piles in that depth range that you'll want to target, instead of going and graphing in 55 foot of water or in 10 foot of water. You can go look at that specific area and do good, and it saves a lot of time if you're short on time. And that's not going to say that there's not fish at other depths. That's just where the majority of the bait fish and the majority of the fish are going to be in the lake. Bait fish is another thing that really determine whether I fish deep or shallow. If you have a lot of bait fish up shallow, fish always just follow the bait. Bluegills, brim beds early in the summer into midsummer. Brim beds draw a lot of big fish, and if there's brim up shallow, there's always big fish around. This time of year, the bait starts, coming to the surface and popping at the top of the water, and they start schooling up. You'll see more schooling fish and more fish roaming out in the middle of the lake, and that's when it gets tough, is when you have those fish that are following those wads of bait, especially blueback herring lakes and places like that. But when the water starts getting really warm, you have the bait start coming to the surface trying to get oxygen, and they just draw the fish, and they can be out in 100 foot of water and they just swim around. Current is another thing. Current can position fish deep and shallow. If you have a ledge, current's a big factor. If you have current moving through a system, you have more oxygen. So if you're fishing more of a river system, you're going to have more fish shallow pretty much all the time, even though places like Chickamauga or Gunnersville or river systems, and they get out on ledges, you can still go catch fish shallow. Kentucky Lake's another good example. You have the oxygen that they can live up shallow, and it doesn't bother them. They just choose to be out deep because there's more bait and they feel better out there. So if you have a river system with current, or if your lake generates a lot of water and have a lot of current pulling through it, then you're more likely to have a few fish shallow this time of year. Water clarity is a big key for me. You want to look, if you have dirty water, fish are like people. If you turn your light, I'm sure everybody's heard this before, if you turn the lights out in your house and you had to find your way out, you would go straight to the wall. You wouldn't be wandering around your living room, your kitchen, trying to find your way out the door. You go straight to the wall and follow your way out, or somewhere you haven't been if it got pitch dark. And that mud does the same thing to fish. So in a lake that it is muddy constantly, they get kind of used to it, like a Ross Barnett. They get out deep, and that water's pretty dirty too. But if you have somewhere that's pretty stained, that keeps a lot of fish shallow because they like to be around something, like wood or rocks up shallow, docks and things like that. They just like to have something around them because they don't want to feel like they're floating out in the middle of the mud bowl. And I mean, there's a few exceptions to that too, but if you have a pretty dirty place that you fish regularly, then there's going to be more fish up shallow versus a place that's gin clear. And at this time of year in the summertime, grass is another huge thing that I look at. Grass will hold a lot of fish because it provides what they need. It has oxygen, it has cover, it's got shade. So if you have a lake that has a lot of grass, and there's all kinds of different types of grass, milfoil, hydrilla, duckweed, lily pads, I call that grass too. I mean, it's vegetation, I should say. And that keeps fish up shallow as well in the summertime. You go to Okeechobee or Lake Toho this time of year, it's actually pretty good fishing, even though the water is probably almost 100 degrees. And you can catch them flipping mats and things like that. It makes those fish easier to find because they're looking for shade. They're looking for the coolest water. They're just trying to get out of the heat, just like we are. And so grass makes a huge difference. If you have a lake that has grass, there's more likely to be fish shallow than there is, or fish out deep. You can always catch them around the grass if your lake has that, which, there's a few lakes in East Tennessee that have them where I'm from. Chickamauga has it, and you can go catch them punching mats right now, probably in Chickamauga, Guntersville, and it's in Alabama. We've got really, as you go further south, the more grass you get, and the more fish you're going to catch shallow later in the summertime. Probably Guntersville's a lot better to fish in the September, October for frogs and stuff, and later in the year it gets really good just because. And I don't think those fish are, a lot of those fish are probably already there. They just, they wait for the grass to get right and all that stuff, and it's just better opportunities for us to show them something that they can see underneath those thick mats. So some of the lures that I picked out here, we've got just some basic things, and I'm going to go through them. It really covers all the areas you need to fish. And the first one is it's a jackal bait that I like to throw a lot. It's just the Archie line. It's a beaver style bait, and a regular beaver will work good. What it's great for, those mats that I was talking about, the grass, the heavy vegetation, it's really designed for thick cover. And so if you're wanting to fish thick cover, with a punching style bait, it's one of the baits that I use. It works really good on a Carolina rig. So if you have a lake that, if you want to do both, and you need to pack of baits that you can take out and do both, fish grass or fish shallow with, or go throw a Carolina rig offshore, a beaver style bait is going to work really well this time of year. It gets a lot of bites because it's subtle. It doesn't make a lot of movement. If you'll notice, the bait fish, if you'll go out and look in a lake and the water is extremely hot, the bait fish are active, but they're not, they're not swimming around really fast. They're swimming around like wintertime bait fish. They're more subtle. They're kind of just trying to survive, and that's what you don't, baits with a lot of action will still catch fish this time of year. I mean, it gets a lot of, buzz baits and things like that get bites too, but something that looks more natural, just kind of glides, something that looks like it's struggling to be alive. It's hurting for oxygen. Water's 90 degrees, they're burning up. They don't, just something that looks easy for the bass, just that mimics what they've been seeing for the past couple of months. And that's the kind of baits that I'll look for this time of year. And we'll go to the robo worm that's right next to it. It's just a finesse style worm. Any kind of finesse worm will work. I like Morning Dawn. That's the color that's got a chartreuse tail on it. But a drop shot rig, that's a huge thing. I know Miles throws it quite a bit, and when it gets tough on those ledges offshore and you can't get the fish to bite and you can see them, that's one bait that I always throw, and I can always catch a few fish off of them. It's just something that last resort. You've been sitting there dragging a jig or Carolina rig or crankbait, swim bait, whatever, and they won't bite. It's a great offshore bait. It's great around bridge pilings. Uh, Anywhere that there's fish, it's super tough. When the fishing's super tough, you can get bites on the robo worm. It's like Red River, some of the places that are just brutal. You can always catch a few fish on it. Something that you need to have in your boat this time of year, just because it'll put fish in your boat when everybody else is having a hard time. And what I've got beside of it is it's a Berkeley power worm, which I've caught so many fish offshore, up shallow. And the baits that I'm showing you, besides the spoon or the spook or a few things like that, are basically baits that you can throw deep and shallow in the middle of the summertime and catch fish. You can throw the spook up deep or up shallow and deep too, but the power worm is something that you can throw in a foot of water or in 50 foot of water. It's just something that you can have tied on. You might change your weight a little bit. Actually, I throw a 3/8 ounce weight on a 10-inch power worm. I'll throw it a foot of water. I'll throw it in 50 foot. I throw the same weight, and it gets bites. It's just something you got to fish so slow this time of year. And that power worm just, whatever, I don't know what it is about it. I've caught so many fish that are just, other people can't catch with throwing crankbaits or football jigs. And I don't know what exactly they think it is, maybe a lamprey or something like that, but they don't like it, and they'll eat it pretty good on a ledge or in a bush or wherever you may throw it. And the next bait I got, it's just a ball and out jig. It's actually Gerald Swindle designed it for Buckeye, and I've never really thrown a round-headed jig like that before until he came out with that. And it is incredible for fishing offshore, like a football jig style, bait, or skipping boat docks. And they make a 3/4 ounce model. They make anywhere from, I think it's 3/8 to they make a quarter too. They make a quarter to a 3/4 ounce. So any size you might need. I throw the 3/8 and a half underneath docks, and I'll throw the 3/4 ounce offshore. It's just a finesse style jig. It has a thin skirt, so it's more of a finesse style jig, but it has a super thick hook in it, so you can you can throw it on 20-pound line underneath boat docks, or you can throw it offshore on a 7/6 extra heavy rod, and it fits all the trailers. It's just a really good jig. It's something that gets bites this time of year. The football jig bite really starts in early summer. I'm referring to Douglas. I'm assuming that most places that have offshore fish, kind of fish the same way. So the football jig is a staple, really. You can just keep it on your boat, the front of your boat, and you can flip with it. You can throw it out on a ledge or a point, any kind of pile of rocks. And I'm referring to largemouth bass, really. I'm not talking, you'll catch smallmouth every now and then, but I'm more referring to largemouth bass. I should probably clarify that. But these are really techniques for largemouth bass, and that's really a good bait to throw. The next is a spoon, and there's all kinds of different spoons that you can throw a big flutter spoon, like an 8-inch. I think Nichols makes one. It's humongous. That's the Magnum spoon. I've caught them on that. One thing that I can tell you, it's a super good tip, and if you'll notice, this time of year, you'll have a lot more bait in the lake than it seemed like earlier in the year. The bait fish that have hatched from the shad spawn earlier in the summer are starting to get big enough where you're going to notice them. And that's where the spoon comes in. Now, the spoon I've got in the picture is pretty big, but the spoons that I throw are like 1/2 ounce or 3/4 ounce jigging spoons, which Hopkins makes them. I think War Eagle makes them. I'm not sponsored by any of these people. That's the spoon I throw. I actually make some. Do It Molds makes a spoon mold that I'll throw, and I'll pour them myself and just paint them white. But they're maybe 2 3/4 inches, 3 inches long. And if you'll look at the bait that was born in the shad, the shad spawn bait, that's the size they're getting. They're small, but they're getting a little bit bigger. And there's more of those than there are bigger bait fish. And I think a lot of the problems we have in summertime fishing is we're still throwing those big baits that we were throwing earlier in the summer, but those big bait fish are outnumbered by the smaller bait fish, and bass, they're opportunists. I mean, they don't just go swimming around. And if there's more of the smaller bait to eat, then they're going to eat those. And it's just a better opportunity for them to get those smaller bait fish. And that's what they're keying in on. And that's not to say they're not going to eat a 6-inch gizzard shad that swims by, but they're seeing more of those 2 and 3-inch small bait fish than they have the rest of the year. And that's what they're starting to eat. They're just starting. It's more. It'll fill them up. It's worth the effort trying to catch them. That's why you start seeing schooling fish, because the majority of those bait fish are out offshore, and the bait fish that you see at the top of the water column are generally pretty small. They're not the big 6, 7, 8-inch gizzard shad. Those all stay super deep. But the smaller bait fish always tend to be close to the top, and that's another thing I was going to talk about. The Sammy. I've got a little Sammy right there that it's been an awesome bait for me. You can throw it in 100 foot of water depending on water clarity. It's a great schooling fish bait. Throw it up shallow. I like the ghost colors regardless of the water color, because it just mimics those smaller bait fish. They can't really tell what it is. They'll still get it good, but if you have a solid white spook or something that's pretty bright, it's not to say they won't eat it. It's just, I think you get more bites with translucent color because they really can't judge the size. So a fish that may want to eat a 2-inch shad will still eat that Sammy, or a fish that'll want to eat a 4 or 5-inch shad will still eat it. It's just, you get more bites with those translucent colors because they can't judge what size it is. And I think that's, the clear top water baits are a big thing right now. And that's another reason why, is that the fish just can't judge what it is. So I've talked a little bit about this already. It's the different phases during the spawn, or during the summer, I should say. And it's a lot like the spawn. And, we've got 4 stages I've got marked out. This is what I had on the top of my head. It's what I always go by. You got early summer, midsummer, late summer, and then the fall transition. And the early summer is the prime time for me. You still have fish spawning. You have fish that are garden fry. You've got fish already eating bluegill off bluegill beds. You've got fish offshore. You can do whatever you want. And it can be tough because the fish are so spread out. And that's what we encountered at Kentucky Lake in the Elite Series event this year. The fish were so spread out. They really weren't offshore that good. It's just, early summer is one of my favorite times to fish because you can key in on what you want to do and go catch fish. You can't try to go do everything. So that's one tip that I have. Early summertime, if you want to go fish deep, you better go graph all day long, and you might find enough fish to do well. Chickamauga, I know that April and May, really, you can go catch 25 pounds offshore. You can go catch 25 pounds bed fishing. It's just whatever you want to do, and you got to stick to it. And that's what I did at Kentucky Lake. I wanted to catch spawning fish, the fish that were just getting done, fry garden fish. And I had a good tournament there. And just by sticking to what I wanted to do, I think that's the biggest key. Going into midsummer, the fish start really getting into their summertime haunts. They start going offshore. They start, willow bushes and boat docks, where they're going to set up to try to survive the brutal summer. That's where they're going to start going. So you still have a lot of fish shallow. You have a lot more fish offshore that are making their way offshore, and they're still trying to feed up from the spawn. They're still skinny, and they're hungry. So they're going to start eating pretty good. So when you catch a lot of fish offshore that time of year, they bleed a lot because they're so frail and just not, real healthy. They're still recovering from that spawning period. And then in the late summertime really is when everything's where, the water's 80 degrees, 85 degrees, depending on where you live. And it gets tough. It's the time of year that we're in right now. It's just getting tough. The fish start roaming around more. They start going after those 2 and 3-inch size baits. And, they tend to go into survival mode. They're trying to eat what they can. They know it's been a long summertime. They're hungry. They're just trying to survive, and they start going after what they see, and they see these big clouds of bait fish swimming around everywhere, depending on, you know, the place that you may live, and that's what they're going after. So late summer times were the hardest times for me to fish, because the fish that are offshore on those ledges, those big schools of fish, have seen so many baits, and they just have seen so much pressure, and it's just, everybody's getting a lot better at fishing, it looks like to me. So everybody has electronics now, or good enough electronics to go out there and make an impact on those fish. So the school of fish that you found, probably 10 other people have found them, and they went out there and caught them every day for the past month on a crankbait or a swim bait. That's when you start throwing the drop shot, start throwing a Ned rig style bait. I didn't include that on the slide. That's another good one. And smaller baits, just to get those fish to bite. And that's, you know, Douglas, you can go out there and throw anything you want to. And sometimes they just don't bite. They just see so many baits that they get all the pressure. I think a lot of those fish, the fish that will bite are the ones that are after the bait out in the middle of the lake. So the fish that are staying down there are the ones still kind of recuperating, and they're just down there. And they'll feed when the opportunity show, you know, current or somebody, the TVA starts generating, or there's a wad of bait comes by or something. But they hear a bass boat pull up, and here comes 2 football jigs and a big old 8-inch spoon, then they're not going to eat it. It's just how it is. It's not like the early summer and the midsummer where they're still likely to bite baits like that. Later on in the year, it just gets tougher. And the fall transition is one of the toughest periods. It's more of a September, October kind of time frame. The water's barely starting to cool off. You have pretty much all of your bait that the fish are keying on, or in, you know, at the top of the water column. Your thermocline usually is gone by then. If you have one, it's pretty shallow, and you can start catching fish in 15 foot of water or less. They start going back to the shallow water, and they can get really hard to catch because they get so keyed in on bait. And that's when you start throwing baits like rattle traps, and you know, you throw those from, you know, 78-degree water temperature till it's too cold to throw it. It's really not too cold to throw it, but they stay in the same kind of areas. You start seeing them roam flats more. You know, you start looking for birds more, seagulls and herons and things like that are keen on those bait too. And the fall transition going into fall can be really tough. But once it gets to fall and all the fish are shallow eating bait, then it can be fun. It can be a lot of fun. If you have grass in your lake, you can catch them on frogs. It's just a great time of the year to fish. But the transition from that summertime where it's still really hot and you see all the bait up on top of the water, it can be hard to catch them. So here's a little, this is not a screenshot, obviously, it's not very good. This is a picture from my telephone of my electronics, and this is just a school fish. It's actually smallmouth, even though this is a largemouth class, but gets the point across at the Mississippi River in La Crosse. So I didn't catch them very good there, but regardless, using your electronics in the summertime is key, whether it be finding bait, whether it be finding structure, or finding fish themselves. If you find bait this time of year, you're going to find bass. And that's later on in the summertime that gets more crucial, because those fish start relating more to the bait than they do a bottom or a type of structure. And I've seen that happen so many times later on. People think it gets super tough and the fish just aren't biting. It's because they're following the bait. And, you know, I just put this screenshot on there to show individual fish, things like that. But that's what you're going to look for, things like that. You can see them stacked up on the bottom. It can be very gradual. It's just a little drop. There's a hard bottom there, and that just enough for those fish to get on. And, you know, you can look at your Navionics charts and find humps and depressions and things like that. But one thing I look for using my charts is creek channels. The bait will follow the creek channels just like bass will, and that's why creek channels are so good, or river channel swings and things like that. And that's one big key for me during the summertime, is looking for using my maps, using my Navionics charts, using my electronics. Let them do the work for you. Don't go out there and some people, I know everybody doesn't have the best electronics, and you don't have to have that stuff to catch fish. It just makes it a lot easier on you. And you can go out there and find, the thermocline, have everything's going to be in 30 foot of water, and you can go start using your navionics charts to find 30 foot of water contours and find a point that hits 30 foot exactly. You might find fish there, but that's just electronics are vital this time of year. And the water was 74 at the Mississippi River, which was, it's a river system way up north. So we were in Wisconsin, so it's actually pretty warm for up there. But yeah, that's a pretty crucial thing is electronics these days, and especially for me, even though I fish shallow. I've got an aluminum boat. I run that express, and people think that if I'm off the bank, then something bad's going on. But growing up in East Tennessee, I know how crucial it is to fish offshore. So I still have to use my electronics and fish out deep. Here's another smallmouth. So I probably should have just had a seminar on smallmouth, even though I can't catch them very good. But that looked like a good picture, so I used that. Primary feeding times. You don't need to go out there and kill yourself. If it's super hot like it is here in Arkansas or Tennessee, fishing during the daytime is brutal. And I guess a lot of it depends on people's, work schedule and things like that. You need to take the time to, whatever time you have, you can go fish. You might only have a few hours during the middle of the day. But the best times to catch fish this time of year are obvious, early morning, late in the evenings, and at night. It's when those fish feed. And I always go back to every seminar that you ever hear me in or see me on. Fish are just like people, and they don't like the heat either, even though they're not walking around out in the air. They don't like the heat either. They're just like us. They'd rather be somewhere cool and just chilling out, eat whenever they want to. And so when it starts cooling off, we just started grilling a little bit ago, and because it started getting cooler, and the fish are the same way, and they're not going to be down there grilling out, but they eat at certain times a lot better than during the middle of the day. They just do, depending on the situation. Now, if you got current and things like that, it can differ. But later in the evenings, things start cooling off. Things start becoming more active. You'll see bait start being more active. They'll start skipping more. They won't just be roaming around. Fish will start eating. And then into the night, you'll have a couple hours where it transitions from daylight to dark that they don't bite very good. But once it gets dark, some of the best trips I've ever had have been in the middle of the night, midnight till 3 o'clock in the morning. That's just because they eat that time. It's a better opportunity for them. They feel a lot safer. They just, for whatever reason, summertime fishing at night is really good. And I don't do it as much, but any lake that allows, I don't know if you could do it somewhere like Okeechobee or Florida because of the mosquitoes and stuff. I mean, I'm sure you could put enough bug spray on and not bother you, but if you haven't went night fishing before, you need to make a trip to do it somewhere in Tennessee or somewhere in Alabama that'll allow you to do it. That's safe, of course. I don't want somebody out there hitting trees and all that, but you can catch the biggest fish of your life. Yeah, you might not catch many, and you might go catch 100, but you have a really good chance to catch one of the biggest fish of your life, because I'm a pretty firm believer that the biggest fish in the lakes they eat primarily at night, even during the winter time. We have a lot of people come down from Kentucky. I hate to keep referring back to Tennessee, but they come down to Douglas in November and fish at night, and I mean it's freezing. I can't believe that in the nighttime it's pretty cold, and they'll fish all night long. I'll show up that morning to fish all day, and they'll be taken out, and they've had incredible days. Catch fish that I've never even thought were in the lake. It's just nighttime's a great time to go, and you just got to be safe and putt around, and you can throw the same baits. You don't have to have special equipment. And I think I'm actually supposed to talk about this in another slide, maybe, but we'll talk about that at the end. I have another slide that talks about nighttime fishing, but this is one thing that I really like to talk about and share with people is summertime and wintertime similarities. So you'll have a lot of anglers that might disagree with how similar the fishing is, but for me, it's extremely similar, the way I like to fish in the summer and the wintertime. Only thing different is I usually have so many clothes on I can't move in the wintertime, and I can't have I have way too many clothes in the summertime. Just you can't have too little clothes in the summertime. But the fish always get lethargic. They don't always, but they can become lethargic, and it's just like winter. You'll have those summertime fish act real similar. And I think that it's just uh, I don't know if they can just tell that things are not very good. It's hot or it's really cold, and they're just in survival mode. They suspend a lot more. You'll see a lot more fish just sitting up in the water column. You'll go over a hump and see a lot of fish. The hump might be in 30 foot of water, and you'll see them up in 15. They suspend real similar to they do in the wintertime. They'll just suspend around balls of bait, and they might move a lot more in the summertime than they do in the wintertime, but they sit in the pretty much same area of water that they'll do in the wintertime. But the techniques that you'll use, vertical presentations, jig and spoons, silver buddies, flies, things like that. You're going to throw those things in the summertime too, and if you don't, you should, because it catches a lot of fish. Hair jigs. If it's crazy that you'll think you'll throw a bigger hair jig in the summertime and you'll throw a small hair jig in the wintertime, but it's just it's all real close together as far as I'm concerned. When I'm having a hard time on a body of water, I always put on a 3-inch swim bait or a small hair jig or a little jig and spoon or something like that. And you can always get bites. And it's just, your wintertime baits aren't limited to winter. You need to bring them back out. Crappie jigs work really well. It's just, if you've been crappie fishing in the summertime, or if you're bluegill fishing with your kids or something, and you catch big bass doing that sometimes by accident. You just don't realize, you don't put it together. And, the wintertime, it's real similar. So some of the lures that you're going to use, I talked about. The little spoon, I talked about that earlier. A little Hopkins deal. I throw out in the dead middle of winter. It can be 38-degree water temperature. Have the same exact spoon tied on, the same exact rod and reel and line that I'll throw in the summertime. Same swim baits, same hair jigs, silver buddies, the Demiki rig that's real popular right now. It catches a lot of largemouth too in the summertime. It's not, you don't need to limit yourself to wintertime baits in the wintertime. You need to bring them back out when it gets brutal, and you'll be surprised at what happens. Throw football jigs. It's just real close to me. The way I like to fish, they line up so close together that I can have my wintertime stuff and catch just as many fish on as I could on a big plug or a big swim bait. It just seems to work out a lot better than a lot of people think. You just don't realize it. So another thing, I know we probably have some people from up north that are like, that all the stuff I'm talking about really doesn't make much sense to them. But what I like to share with people, northern bass are a lot different. They don't have as much time to grow, and they have the same amount of time to feed, but the opportunities for them aren't as great up north. Stuff isn't as active as long. So summertime up north can be amazing when everything's super tough in the south. It can be amazing up north because those fish know time's running out. I better eat while I can before wintertime gets here, because the summers are a lot shorter. There's really 2 seasons up north. It's winter and summer. From my experience, the time that I've spent up there, you have a few weeks of spring and a few weeks of fall, it seems like. But the fish, that's the way the fish act anyway. So the fish are always biting, it seems like, up north, because they know the stuff's about to get real. And if they want to survive the wintertime, they better eat while they can. That's why you see so many huge, fat smallmouth. And that's why the largemouth don't get as big up north. I mean, you have huge, you can catch 5 and 6 pounders, and I'm sure they're bigger than that up there, but they don't have that growing season that they do. So the opportunity for them is a lot less. So they have to take advantage of the time that they have compared to our fish down south, where they have a lot of time in the summertime to eat. They make their choices, and it makes the fishing a lot tougher, because they can, our bait can go by their face and they'll say, hey, I really don't want to eat that right now. As we're up north, they better eat it or they're going to die, so to speak. So that's just one thing to think about. So if the fishing's tough down here, just go up north. I mean, it's not to say that fishing is going to be amazing, but it's going to be a lot better. I know that a lot of people go up and smallmouth fish, and but the largemouth fishing up north is really good too. St. Clair has an amazing largemouth population that people don't ever fish for, and I've had a ball up there fishing. So it's just something to think about. It's a lot different the further north you go. So some of the stuff that I've been talking about, you really don't need to put it to use up there, and you can if it gets super tough. You can always use some of the tips that I've given you up north, but it's just it seems like it's the exact opposite. You know, your fishing is going to get better the further north you go, and it's going to get worse the further south you go. So I told you we had a slide at nighttime, and I don't know how many people are even interested in this, but it's something I wanted to share, and something that I always used to do in the middle of summertime, because I didn't get to fish as much as I do now, so I took every opportunity I could to go fishing, and it just seemed like the fish wouldn't bite during the day, so we had to go at night, and you'd sleep, until 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, and then go out and stay until it got daylight. And one big thing that's beneficial for fishing at nights, not being in the sun. It's really crucial to not get overheated, and I've had it happen to me. I've got way too hot. I know that there's been a couple people on the Elite Series have gotten dehydrated, had to go to the hospital this year, just from not being careful about taking in fluids and staying, cooled down. And night fishing can really eliminate that. You don't have to worry as much. It can still be really hot, and you can still sweat a lot and lose a lot of fluids, but the sun's not beating down on you. It's a great time to fish. It's really when the big fish really feed at night. It's just a better opportunity to catch a bigger fish. If you watch the moon phases, a new moon or a full moon is really the best. It can be pitch black, and you can catch them really well, or you can see just like you do in the daytime. And it can work out really well too. That's some of the best nights I ever had, were when it was pitch dark, or you can see the moon, you can travel across the lake. That's just a big key to be safe. Navionics charts are great, and I use them at night too, but you always want to just be careful and rely on, you don't want to have your face buried in your electronics the entire time. You want to watch out too, because there's, people that don't have their lights in, or dogs can be floating and a few things like that. But it's a great time to go. You can take a pill. If you're on vacation, or if you have a few days off work or whatever, and you just want to get out of the house and go fishing, and if you get tired, you can just sleep on your boat. If there's not too many mosquitoes, I've done it before. It's a lot of fun. You're getting all the hours of fishing in that, the fish are feeding in the best in the evening, at night, and then first thing in the morning. Then you can go back home and do whatever you need to do. So if you get tired at night, you can just roll over and go to sleep, and works out good. We used to fish 12-hour tournaments that we'd pretty much sleep half the night, because we would catch them the best right before it got dark and after the sun come up a little bit. So that's another thing I wanted to share with you. I've talked a little bit about all these slides at some point, but staying cool. It's pretty much later in the year. It's still going to be hot for quite a while, so you want to wear light colored clothing. I see a lot of people wear super dark colored clothing, and they'll wear blue jeans, and they'll wear their big black fishing shirt, and you're making it harder on yourself. And I may not be used to it like other people, but I always wear light colored clothing, whites, light blues, things like that, stuff that reflects the sun, keeps you cool down. Long sleeves. I was one of the young kids that wouldn't wear long sleeves, and wouldn't wear those gaiters and all that stuff. I still don't wear those, but I wear the hook. They actually have a performance shirt that's got a hood on it that I wear. I pretty much wear it every single day. And I used to have this amazing tan and all that, and now I really don't care about it, because so many of the people I've looked up to have sores on them. They're getting stuff cut off of them every day at the doctor with skin cancer. If you're going to be out fishing a lot, you need to protect yourself. And people told me that for years, and I never really listened. And this year I started listening, and I feel a lot better when I get off the water. You'd be surprised at how much a white long sleeve t-shirt of a certain material, you want breathable material, will make a difference at the end of the day than if that sun's beating down on your skin all day long. And I know some people fish without t-shirts and stuff. I can't do it. I have to have some protection from the sun. Your body stays cool. They make those cooling towels that you can put in your ice box, keep it around your neck, keeps your body temperature down. and those help a lot too. You can keep a couple of them in your ice box, and they'll help throughout the day. It just makes your day a lot easier. If you have to fish during the middle of the day, it'll make it a lot easier. Fishing in the shade. So if you're not like in a major tournament, or if you're just out fun fishing, go find a bridge, go find overhanging trees, and you'll be surprised that actually a lot of the fish, that's where they're going to, because they don't like the heat either. They don't like the sun. So underneath bridge pilings, and like I said, underneath boat docks, things like that, marinas that have empty slips, you can kind of squeeze into that people wouldn't mind you doing, and if you didn't get in trouble. And fish in there and take your time. That's just something easy to do. It's something I do a lot when I'm fun fishing at the house. Is I'll go fish under a bridge, or I don't want to kill myself, I'm trying to have a good time. So it's, if you're not practicing for a major event, or if you're not fishing a major event, then just go have fun and stay in the shade. And I talked about it earlier, fish early and late and skip midday if you can possibly do it. If you can't, just go have a good time and stay cool, and just, drink a lot of water, and try to stay out of the sun as best you can. So I think we're good. We'll be good on time, Miles. I think.
Yeah, I think we're looking good on time. Currently, don't have any questions.
No question. I must have sucked then, huh?
No, that's you probably covered everything is the thing. So now that you're kind of wrapped up here, let's get some questions from people. It looks like we already got some coming in.
We'll see if I can. Can you see me now?
Oh yeah, I got you. Now I could see the whole time.
Oh, you could see me the whole time?
Oh yeah.
Well, I didn't know that, or I would have probably looked at the camera. I was probably picking my nose and everything.
It's all good. No, you're perfect, man.
Right.
So we got a question from Martin. What about where you have an enormous amount of bait fish schools, aka shad, and fish activity around them? The schools of bait fish are calm and just moving around slowly in a mass in the upper portion of the water column. We see this a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you'll see, you'll notice that you'll see hundreds of bait fish, or probably millions of bait fish, but you may not see a lot of activity around them. And that's what I was talking about. Those fish, you'll be surprised at how many are below them, just kind of roaming around, waiting for that right time for one to slip off. And one thing I do a lot is actually take maybe a medium-sized crankbait that dives 10 or 15 foot and throw them underneath those bait balls. It might be in the middle of the lake, but there might be one or two big fish just kind of waiting for somebody to mess up and kind of peel off from the school. And it's just tough when those bait fish are doing that. Everything acts pretty much the same in the water. And the bass are probably pretty lethargic that time of year too, waiting for that fall to get there where things are starting to cool down. And those fish are probably just roaming around. And you'll see them school in the evenings. You'll see them school in the mornings. They'll start schooling up on those bait fish. But in the middle of the day, they just kind of roam around out there. You're lucky to catch them. I mean, you can get on, pretty big schools of fish, but for the most part, they're just following that bait around.
So I've kind of had experience with bait, a situation where you've got so much bait around that sometimes you can have too much bait. Do you have that same experience on
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's it seems like, especially if, for us, and a lot of people probably don't have the shad die off in the wintertime, but you can notice how great the shad spawn was. If you had the water was high, the shad spawned really well. It can just be brutally tough, and they just don't eat anything other than what they're looking at. I mean, you can have fish breaking around the boat everywhere, and you throw a top water bait or something that looks just like what they're eating, and you still might not catch one just because they're so honed in on what they're doing. Then you just don't get bites. There can be way too much bait, that's for sure.
Right on. Yeah. We've got a question from John. Do you rely more on down imaging or side imaging, depending on the brand that you're using?
Right.
Which one do you depend on more, if there is a preference?
Yeah, I use down imaging a lot. I used to use regular 2D. I use side imaging not necessarily for looking for fish. I know a lot of people do, but I look for more structure. You can see fish on it, but I'll mark maybe a brush pile or a culvert or something underneath the water with side vision, something that I'm looking for structure. But I use 2D and I'll use my down vision. The down vision gives you separation. So if you see something on the regular, and I'm talking 2D, it's like the old school. Well, it's not really old school, but it's the colored, that's just show arches, what everybody used to have. The 2D, and you can have fish so tight to the bottom that you really can't tell what you're looking at. The down vision will show that distinction from the fish in the bottom if you need it. And I rely on down vision a lot. Now, if I'm fishing up front, like video game fishing vertical, I use 2D 100% of the time, just because it shows, I feel like it's more real time. I feel like I know what the fish, it shows the trail of the fish a lot better, shows them coming to your bait. That's just a few of my preferences. I rarely use side vision to find fish. If I can see them on there, that's great, but I just use it for more structure.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. I personally, neither of them are replaceable. They both have their place for sure. All right, so that you kind of covered this one. Herbert asks, if the entire lake is covered with bait balls, how do you determine where to start? Do you have an idea about where you would want to start if everything's covered?
Yeah. One thing I do a lot. So if you have that situation, and I probably should have brought this up. If you have this situation where you have all that bait and you're not getting bites, and you see fish breaking and you're not getting bites, I always go and I'll throw a jig or something that imitates a crawfish or something different. I know people that throw bright red spinner baits through those bait balls and catch just as many fish as you do on something that looks just like the bait. But you might go away from the bait balls, or you might fish around them, just throw a jig, fish the bank. Something that those fish, they've been eating shad for however long, and there's a crawdad on the bottom. They're going to take that opportunity. Something different. It's like if you eat I'm using all the same stuff that everybody always says, but if you eat a cheeseburger for 2 weeks in a row, then if something else comes by, you're probably going to bite it, or you're going to want to eat it. So that fish are the same way. They're just, they think a lot like us. And now they're probably a lot smarter than me, but they're not nearly as smart as most people. But they're pretty darn smart, and they think a lot alike.
All right. So we've got a question from Mark. We've got, how much time do you devote to a school before you move on? How many schools do you need to find and practice?
So it really depends on the water, like where you're at, but I find as many as possible, and I don't spend much time at all. I might make 5 casts to a school of fish. So, if you really need to hunker down and throw a drop shot or something like that, the amount of time that it takes you to get 5 casts in with a drop shot, you really need to be going somewhere else, because you have to fish super slow. If it's really tough. Now, if the fishing's been good and you have a great school of fish and you pull up on them and you throw 5 or 6 times with a deep diamond crankbait or a football jig, then I'll leave if you don't get bites. Now you come back, but if you have 5 or 6 schools of fish, you rotate them all day long, depending on how far apart they are. I like to have a lot more than that, depending on driving distance, of course. But now, if you have a place and you're fishing a tournament and you know that a lot of people are going to be fishing your other holes, and you have a spot that you caught a big one off of, or they're still there, and you can sit there. But in my experience, the longer you fish for a school of fish, the tougher it seems to get, unless there's something happens, whether they start drawing current, or something like that's really the only thing I've seen make them start biting. It doesn't like that it's going to get any better unless they start doing that, or the wind starts blowing or something.
All right. So we got another question here from John. He asks, have you fished the Upper Chesapeake Bay? That's the #1 question. Have you fished that one?
Yeah. I've fished the Upper Chesapeake Bay. We actually had the Elite Series tournament canceled.
Yeah.
And so I fished there in practice, and it was tough. I mean, the Susquehanna flats were good, of course, but I had a hard time. I mean, it was so muddy, and we had a flood tide coming in. We really didn't get to showcase that place. I know it's good. I know the fishing's decent. But if we would have had that event, it would have been the record lowest weight tournament we'd have ever had if we'd have had it. And part of the reason they canceled it, well, the main reason they canceled it was the flood that came down. They had, 30 some gates on the Conowingo Dam, which is, I don't know if they've ever done that, but it was horrible. The conditions we had, it rained 15 inches in 2 days. So, we didn't get to see what it had. I mean, I got to experience a little bit of it. It seems like it could be a really good place to fish.
Looks pretty cool. He asked, did you fish the area, and I'm probably gonna hack this name, but it's Havre de Grace
Yeah, yep.
area.
Yeah,
Right
you
on.
got that good. That was, that's right there near the Susquehanna River where it dumps into the Chesapeake Bay, and the Susquehanna Flats. That's the biggest place where everybody, well, that was where everybody's going to fish. So pretty much the entire, maybe 80% of the field was going to fish that area, and then the mud started coming down, and it's this huge grass flat. So they kind of eliminated that. There was a few small areas that were clean, but all that area right there was pretty much blown out. I mean, we had a flood tide plus the rain that we had, and all the creeks were pure mud. It just wasn't good. It wasn't good for us at all. So it was. I hate that they canceled it, but for safety reasons, that's what happened. There was trees floating, and I mean huge trees in people's houses. I don't think if we go anywhere and somebody's house is flooding, I don't think we need to. It's just not appropriate. I don't think to fish.
Probably not.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. All right, so we've got another question from Matthew. I fish mostly lowland reservoirs in Texas, Lake Fork mainly. It can be extremely hard to find fish out deep. Do you focus on deep trees or humps/ledges?
And I don't have much experience in Texas, but from what I know, those guys that time of year, it's all about the channels and that timber. And I've done it a few in Conroe and Rayburn, places like that. It's all about the channels. So, those deeper channels, you might have thousands of trees that are the same, and you have a creek channel running through them, and that's where you really need to focus. I don't know if it's more. I'm sure that the deeper trees are probably better, but I think it's more something different. Every time I fish standing timber, it's always something different, whether it be the trees laying down or there's two trees close together. But mainly it's the channels to swing through them. That's a big factor. A sharp bend or something in 25 foot of water probably has the most fish.
All right. Yeah, my experience in lowland reservoirs such as like Toledo Bend and Sam Rayburn there in Texas, also don't be afraid to fish the shallow grass. I mean,
Yeah.
those like you said, don't run away from your strengths. If you
Oh yeah, absolutely.
shallow.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So we've got a question here. This one may be more applicable to me as far as using a Lowrance unit. This is from Kent. Kent, if you want to individually just send me an email to sonar@sonarfishing.com, I'll probably be able to help you with that.
I don't mind at all. I mean,
if it's honest, he just asked, can you use fishing ranges, aka color shading, on HDS 12 Gen 2?
okay. I mean, you're more than welcome to answer anything that they ask.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just as good as me as far as I'm concerned.
The
So
quick answer is I don't generally use the depth shading that much on my Lowrance units. I don't get too in depth with it. I've just learned to read my Navionics maps as they are, but there is actually some options if you have a current subscription to like a Hot Maps Platinum card. There's some advanced map features on there that you can use that you can find on your menu under your chart menu to adjust some of those things, such as the shallow depth and fishing ranges and such like that. But again, if you have any more questions about that, you can send me an email at sonar@sonarfishing.com. And thanks for the question, Kent. So this is from Pat. Do you currently hold a Tennessee state record?
do I currently hold one? No, I've got a lake record, but it's toss up. No, my father has a state record.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he caught it a state record red horse, which is a sucker fish.
Oh wait. This is yeah. Okay, this is suspicious because the name is
It's
Pat.
it's probably him.
Yeah, it's got to be him. I didn't read the last name. Come on, man.
See, I'm pretty much. He was gonna throw it back, and he didn't know what it was. So I just, being the geek that I am, I knew what kind of fish it was, and I knew the state record was like 4 ounces or whatever. So I said, hey. It was a smallmouth red horse, which is just they really don't bite baits. He caught on a piece of shrimp, but yeah, it's
Oh, come on, Pap. You're going to showboat over that?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's got every year in the TWRA magazine. Every year he gets the magazine, he circles it and hangs it up somewhere. So that's
Oh, man, that's great. I want to see what kind of species that is. That's hilarious.
yeah. If too
We've
many
got,
people find out, they're going to break his record.
all right. So we got another question from John. If you're not getting any bites, then how long do you fish a certain bait before you switch to another bait?
So it really depends on, if I'm not getting a lot of bites, I might make changes to the bait, maybe it be color or whatever. But um, I really stick with a few key baits, pretty much the ones that I showed in the video. If you can't, this time of year, if it's super tough, you want to stick to, what you have confidence in. You don't want to lose confidence. I don't think that I think baits don't mean as much as we think they do. I think if a fish is going to eat, then, a small difference can make you get a few more bites. But if you stick to, so like the spoon, so if I'm throwing the spoon and I drop down on 2 or 3 fish and they don't bite it, I might switch to a white one, or I might switch to a gold one, or I might switch to, I'll do things like that. But I do it pretty quick too, take 1 or 2 fish, to tell you. But if you can't see them on your electronics, of course, then you just want to make those changes in your head if you think you're around fish and they don't bite.
Right on. All right. So we got a question from Jim. He has a club tourney on Saturday. Good luck on Patrick Henry.
Yeah.
Where's Patrick Henry? Is that here in Tennessee?
So I fish Patrick, and now it's up.
Oh,
in,
that's
yeah,
right. I do know where that is.
it's right there near Boone and all that stuff. And I fished it like twice in when I was real young. And God, it was. I think we had one tournament there. I don't know how many boats were in it. Probably 30. Nobody caught a fish. And
Hmm.
then the next week it took like 28 pounds to win. So I fished deep docks. Every time I was there, I found the deepest docks I could find. It's really clear. It's got trout and stuff in it. There's huge fish. There's huge bass in that lake. But I fished boat docks with a jig that would fall really slow, like a mop jig style bait, and actually caught them on a buckeye mop jig. But that something that falls really slow, and the docks were in like 80 foot of water. I mean, they were really deep, and it just your line would just stop and there would be a fish. So I'm sure the spoon deal would work good there because I didn't know what I was doing, and
Well,
I was
let
fortunate
me
to just.
let me throw a wrench in that because he asked about night fishing. So it's a
Oh,
night tournament. So
yeah.
no, I didn't say that before, but it's a night tournament. I mean, I would think that mop jig would work pretty good in that situation too.
Dude, the mop jig is probably my favorite nighttime fishing bait just because it's so bulky and has so much going on. But I know a lot of guys at Patrick Henry at night throw a black buzz bait. It's hard to beat it. They just go around I guess, bluffs and things like that. It's a big deal on Patrick Henry. That's probably what I would be doing. Even spooks work really good, but lights on boat docks that draw bait around in the middle of the night are usually pretty good too.
Right on. All right. So Greg has says that he had a bunch of smallmouth swimming underneath the boat recently, threw all kinds of baits at him, but none of them would bite. What would you do in a situation like that? Go bigger, go smaller, do something else?
It'd probably go smaller, of course, for me, but line size is a huge thing. Downsize your line to maybe even 6 pound test lines about as wide as I've got 5 in my boat. I don't use it very often, but I always go with small line. That makes a huge difference this time of year. I don't know why, but it just makes a bigger difference. It seems like, especially with smallmouth, they're so line shy. But the tougher it gets, I always start downsizing my baits, downsizing my line, and sometimes I mean, I'm sure there's things you can do to make them bite, but sometimes you just can't get them to bite. And that's just the way it is. I mean, you keep coming back, trying different things. Maybe try if you can see them under your boat, maybe stay off of them and throw to them instead of trying to catch them underneath the boat. Just if you're not catching them, don't keep doing the same thing. Just try a bunch of other stuff. It's not like it's going to hurt anything.
Right on. All right. So, oh shoot, I deleted one question. That was actually a really good question. I'm gonna try to repeat it. We had a question about Navionics maps. He's got a Navionics Plus card, great card, and he was wondering how does Navionics cards show creek channels and river channels, and if so, what do they look like? And this is a question that both of us can answer.
Yeah.
So go ahead with your answer.
Yeah, and you can probably go into more details of how to get it pulled up. But I know on my electronics, and I know we both run different brands of electronics, but I have it highlighted. I have a little, I think they're little red dots, or it actually shows them, or maybe an orange streak or something that'll show the creek channel and the river channel. And it actually helps you when you're running too. But you can also tell by just the topo lines, of course, if you can read a topo map. But I have it. It's just a set. I think it's in the overlay setting or whatever, maybe in your chart settings. But you can turn it on, and I didn't know I had it until this year. And I turned it on. It's like a whole different world. You have all these little routes. It looks like roads. I mean, it's pretty neat. You could probably go into it. I just turned it on. I don't know how I did it, but it's a useful tool for sure.
Yeah, the on my Lowrance units that I use, the creek channels do show up relatively clear with the with orange, markers kind of denoting the channel. But like you, I really think that the more important thing to do is to learn how to read the topographic map. I mean, I've got my Navionics, mobile app here. You can see on Chickamauga, we've got the creek channel here. And of course, with the depth shading that we've got on the app, you can easily, show you can see the lighter color right here. That's the deepest part in the lake. That's the creek channel. And so I think it's really important to just learn the contours overall, because those are really going to be the more accurate representation of the creek. If you have the lines closer together, that's generally where a creek channel is at least getting close to a shoreline or something like that, or you have a creek channel. And once you learn how to read it, it's pretty easy to tell where the creek channels are.
Yeah, I've actually the setting on mine is called seabed. Like it's turned off, but it's like you have all the rocks and the whatever, and one of them is seabed, and it highlights the creek channels and the main channel and all that stuff. So I don't know if they all have that, but I would assume they would. And that's just I've turned it on mine. It's a big help for sure.
Right on. All right, so Daniel asked, you ever kayak fish?
Yeah, I actually grew up. That's how I really got my start. My parents got me a kayak, and I'd get home from high school, I'd fish. I know you do a lot more kayak fishing than I do now, but that's how I got my start. So yeah, you're the kayak master. I just grew up doing it, so I haven't done it forever.
No, we have a friend that's a kayak master, Scotty.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, Scotty, he's a kayak master.
I love kayak fishing, but I've also got a big boat, so it's hard to get out of that sometimes.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a question from Adam here. What do you look for when fishing shallow, muddy tidal river systems such as the Sabine in the heat of the summer?
So actually, I think I'm the only Elite Series angler that really enjoyed fishing the Sabine River. I loved that place. I'd go back if I was going to go fun fish. That's somewhere I'd want to go. I mean, it was actually a lot of fun because the fish were pretty predictable. I mean, it's tough because there's a lot of fish. There's just not many big ones. Muddy tidal systems are probably it's one of the tough. Mentally, it's one of the toughest places to fish. But it's more about the tide movement. You have to look at the bank, the way the land lays out more or less, because everything gets funneled to those fish. So you want to look for tidal ditches. I pretty much caught all my fish at Sabine out of two spots. One of them was a ditch that was too small to get my boat into, that would funnel into a little pocket. And I sat there every morning. I would catch 20 or 30 keepers. And I didn't the first day because I didn't go there. But the second, third day, I would limit out because all the stuff that was in that little ditch was funneling to those fish, and the fish know that, whether it's muddy or not. Now there was another area that was a ditch that I could get my boat into that they just lived in. So you're wanting that water flow. The fish are smart. They want the food coming to them, so they're going to set up that way. And that's what I look for in those situations, is places that the food comes funneling to them, to the bass, and that's where they're going to sit.
Excellent. Okay. Do you fish the mayfly hatch during the summertime?
I do. Depending on where it's at, we don't have I don't know if I've ever seen one in where I live, but I know that Arkansas River and places further south, it's a big thing. And the tournament that I won, the Open in 2016, I was fishing the mayfly hatch, so I never fished one before in my life. Yeah, I caught them on a mayfly hatch. So, yeah, but it was more or less the bluegill. I think the bass will definitely eat them, but I think the bigger bass are more focused on the bluegill that are eating the mayflies than they are the actual mayflies. And that was the deal. I was throwing a bluegill imitating bait, and the bluegill were eating the mayflies. So that was a big key for me. But you got to look at the food chain. I don't think you need to go out there and try to imitate a mayfly. I mean, you probably couldn't catch a lot of small fish, but you need to imitate what's eating the mayflies mostly. And that's bluegill and brim.
We had a big one here at Chickamauga about a month and a half ago. Real big one. I didn't realize we had this big of a mayfly hatch, but it was big.
I've never seen one at Douglas unless I just haven't paid attention.
It was a very narrow window. It was like 1 week.
I've probably been gone every time it's happened.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. All right, that looks like that's the last question right now. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up, I think. One thing I want to mention is thank you to Navionics for putting this on, and of course thank you, Skylar, for doing this. Skylar, tell everybody how they can reach you.
Yeah, so I've got Instagram, got Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. My Instagram is Pro Fish Skylar, and that's where I'm most active, more or less. Got a website, SkylarHamiltonFishing.com. You can follow me on the Elite Series. I'm right there in the middle of everything. So you can go to Bassmaster.com, follow me on there. We've got one more tournament left, the St. Lawrence River. It's smallmouth fishing, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, that's Instagram. If you want to get in touch with me or ask me any questions, that's the best place to do it, because I stay on there looking at funny stuff all the time.
Right on, man. Well, good luck up there at the St. Lawrence River, and for you guys that are watching this, whether it's recorded or you're watching it live right now, you can watch other Navionics recordings on their YouTube page. So go check that out. There's a lot of different webinars. I've done a few, and I know is this your first one or?
That's my second one. Yeah, second one.
So Skylar's got another one. But we're going to stop recording right now, but thank you guys so much for attending. I know we all learned a lot here. Thanks, Skylar.
No problem. Thank you.